Welcome to Beyond Names. I'm Dr. Habīb. This is a space for spiritual seekers and soulful misfits, for the curious and the committed, for those grounded in a tradition, and for those who are not sure what they believe. Whether you call the divine God, Yahweh, Allah, Elohim, Brahman, Great Spirit, higher power, or you're still searching for language that fits, you are welcome here. Together, we'll explore the intersection of spirituality and daily life, the wisdom of many traditions, and the ways we return to our true selves, to our source, to the light that each of us carry within. I'm so glad you're here. Let's begin with an introduction of our conversation partner for this episode, Felicia Murrell. Felicia is an author and spiritual director. In fact, Felicia and I are in training together to become compassion-based spiritual director supervisors. Felicia is the author of Truth Encounters and her most recent book, and The Restorative Power of Love in an Either or World was named Englewood Book Review Most Anticipated Books. To learn more about Felicia and her work, please visit her website, which is Felicia, Felicia, Murrell, Murrell.com. Felicia, thank you for being here. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have this time to get to chat with you.
Thank you for having me. It is a real delight to be with you today.
So, would you please tell us a bit about your spiritual story as a way of introducing yourself?
Yeah, I can do that. I think it feels almost like a circle. I tell people that I'm a product of the South, and my story begins in the rural South in the 70s.
Mm,
Um, in those days, churches, and in our town, I should say, churches didn't have a preacher every Sunday. And so on the first and third Sunday, I attended the African Methodist Episcopal Church, AME, with my father's family. And on the second and fourth Sunday, I attended United Church of Christ with my mother's side of the family. So, and then around age 12, my mother had what we would call a born again religious experience. And she left denominational churches and started attending Word of Faith, charismatic, Pentecostal type churches.
mm,
So I say that because my beginnings are somewhat of a religious mutt. I've had experiences in a lot of different denominations, but the
yeah.
full circle part of that in the story is that I find myself now very much still with Christianity as my mother tongue, although I consider myself more at home in interspiritual practices and interfaith communities of belonging.
Mm,
Yeah.
beautiful. I can certainly relate to the spiritual diversity. I don't want to use the word spiritual mutt because I think it's okay for you to say, but I'm not sure I can say that. But I appreciate that as someone who has. I was just thinking about this morning that what a unique background of coming from having a Muslim first name and a Jewish last name, and my birthday was Todd. Like, and that just captures to me small Texas town, conservative Christian family that is descended from the son of a, a German Jewish man and his mistress,
Wow.
who eventually converted to Islam after studying Sufism, after Islamic mysticism for years. So I can definitely relate to that that
I,
diversity. Um,
I
so
appreciate the fluidity of hybrid, that hybrid kind of spirituality. So you get to learn a lot and see where there are parallels and the different religious traditions and the different wisdom traditions. So
Yeah.
someone
And
once said they were
landing,
all fingers pointing to the moon, right?
I love that. Could you say that one more time?
Yeah, someone once said that they were all fingers pointing to the moon.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I love in my study of mysticism is how the outer differences fall away, and there's this element of inner differences and as being the same, as being one. And and I have to say that that idea is something that I've carried and has been a pivotal part of my own spiritual journey. When I was in a point in, we all have different moments in our lives of spiritual awakening. For me, so I guess some of us are more easily awoke, and some of us have to be hit pretty hard. Um, so for me, after the death of all of the immediate members of my family, what the divine placed in front of me was Sufism.
Mhm.
And what opened the door for me was hearing this Sufi sheikh say, if a person who is Christian or Jewish or Muslim knows their religion well, they know that there's only one religion, and that's the religion of love,
Yeah.
peace, mercy. So, this teaching that there's only one religion, and that is the religion of love and peace and mercy and justice and freedom for all without separation, like that really hit my heart in a way that just landed more fully than what I experienced previously. And so, when I looked at the description of your book and the restorative power of love, and I'm just going to read this. So, and the restorative power of love in an either or world is an invitation to move beyond binaries, beyond hierarchy and comparison, to embrace the concept of and with an inclusion and generativity that allow for more than one perspective and or way of being. This book is for those who want to think more deeply, those who are asking questions of how, what, and perhaps even why, and those who want to engage in deep listening and empathy. And so when I read that, like it actually evoked that sort of what I call pivotal awakening moment for me, how many 20 plus years ago, when I first had that moment that for me opened the door to an experience of unitive love.
I love that so much. Yeah.
So, with that in mind, I can't wait to hear uh, about your book.
Yeah.
So, what would you like to share?
Yeah. I have some passages marked, and I just want to say, in talking about spiritual awakening too, as you share that, and it'll lead me into a passage in the book. And I think for me, I remember a time just going to church, doing the whole thing, and feeling like there's got to be more. There's got to be more. And I was going to church, but I was still frustrated. I was still angry. I was still all the things. I didn't feel like I was. There's a scripture in the Christian tradition that says, "You will know them by their love." And I
Hmm,
didn't feel like I was exhibiting that love, but I didn't know how to get there.
yeah.
Um, and so one of the awakenings that happened to me, and I will read that as a portion of a piece on page um, 189. And it says, if what we believe to be true about God frames every part of our existence, whose inherited ideas have shaped the foundation of our God concept? What preconceived notions or habits of thought might we be projecting onto God? Are those preconceptions our own? How did we arrive at those conclusions? If what we believe about God frames our lived experience and how we relate to and interact with the world around us, how are we discovering or rediscovering divine love for ourselves? How might divine love be inviting us to reorient our mind to the Holy Three's goodness and kind intentions toward us? For the greater part of my life, I lived with a superficial, shallow God who was angry, distant, and always waited until late in the midnight hour to turn things around, or didn't, using bad events to teach me a lesson. I remade God into an undependable, unfeeling, callous, Zeus like image, more devil than deity. Just white and big instead of red with a tail and pitchfork. Vision clouded, disappointments kept me from knowing divine love and seeing love as love truly is. One day I met a couple who described God as a father who loves me, a mother who comforts and welcomes me, and prepares a seat for me at her beautiful table. They described a God who was running toward me and not from me, a God who wasn't withholding good from me because I forgot to pay my tithes, a God who included and affirmed all, whose banner over all is love. The core of my being leaped, inviting me to challenge all that I once believed to be true about God. Could I have imagined an illusion, an image of God that wasn't exactly there? Was my mind playing tricks on me? Had I conjured a false, graven image of God? Indeed, I had. But thankfully, I'm seeing a bit clearer now. That was my spiritual awakening that led me into what Father Thomas Keating calls receptivity over effort, especially in prayer. And it led me to just learning to be with the divine and to receive the love of the divine into every part of me and to let that transform me. And then to live from inside out, to live that love and to be that love in the world. So,
Yeah. I want to write down everything you say, but I'm probably not going to probably not going to capture everything. Um, I just want to sort of reflect the beauty of what you're saying and just how deeply it resonates with me. And I've been working on a manuscript that is all but finished that is so resonant with what you're sharing from your own book. And one of the things that I start the manuscript with is a quote from, gosh, I'm not going to remember the name of the book now. It's, I think it's How God Changes Your Brain by
oh,
Andrew Newberg and Mark, and I don't, anyway, the idea is that these neuroscientists who are not of themselves religious people or inherently spiritual, they say that at the onset, but they've done all this research and they found how much spirituality and spiritual practices has a positive effect on the brain and positive effect on mental health and physical health. And one of the things that they noted was that in the States, we, we Americans tend to think of God as that white guy in the sky who's angry, who's judgmental, who's distant. Whereas if you look globally and you look at religion and spirituality as a whole, the greater perception of God is of a unitive
yeah,
God as loving,
yeah,
um, as God that is both immanent and the transcendent,
that's right.
as a God that's both available for intimacy
Yeah,
and in the utmost politeness waiting with
yeah,
you, nearer to you than your own jugular vein, but waiting so politely for you and your own receptivity.
yeah,
So when you talked about that Thomas Keating quote, I thought, oh, of course this resonates. When I teach spiritual formation classes, I very often say that the path of spiritual development or personal transformation, personal growth is remembering,
Yes.
reading, reflecting,
Yes.
receiving, returning.
Yes.
Remembering the truth of who we are,
Yeah.
remembering the truth of the divine,
Yeah.
reading the signs of the divine in the world,
Yeah.
reflecting. We need time in contemplation, receiving the light. There's so much, some of which are of our spiritual walking and our personal growth has to do with the degree of our receptivity to receive divine love and light.
Yeah.
And through all of that, returning to our true selves and returning to the divine
Yeah.
um, again and again and again until we are truly home.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I feel so
Yeah.
resonant with that. And
I say
I
the
will say,
same.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to add that I say the same when people ask me about spirituality and what it means to me. I say spirituality is an invitation into a way of love that
Mhm.
is so wholly relational and free. It's coming home to the truth of your being. That if we get quiet enough and still enough, we can listen to our souls remembering. And then once
Mhm.
we've glimpsed our sacred core and we understand the truth of our own goodness, we can live from that interior freedom. Um, and so I'm feeling the resonance.
Preach.
I'm feeling the resonance in that.
Can you say it again?
Yeah, yeah. That spirituality is an invitation into a way of love that is so wholly relational and free. It's coming home to the truth of your being, and it's getting quiet and still enough to listen to your soul's remembering, right? And then once we've glimpsed our sacred core and we understand the truth of our goodness, that we can live from that interior freedom. That's spirituality. It's just coming home to ourselves and our soul remembering that, putting it all the pieces back together again, and then living from the truth of that interior freedom, which there's no way that we live from that truth without reconnecting to the divine, reconnecting to one another, right? Like what comes out of that is a sense of our interconnectedness, um, across sciences, across spirituality, across, it just all of a sudden you realize that you are not a silo, you are part of a web.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. There's so many things that I could pick up on, pick up on that. One of the things that I want to um, emphasize is you're talking about that interior movement or that interior awakening or that interior awareness of or remembering of the soul, I believe you said. Yeah. And so I just have to point out that that's really not easy for some folks. I mean, we live in a world that is all about distraction
Yeah.
and is all about grabbing your energy, grabbing your attention, which is about keeping you up and out and not encouraging that inner movement and that cultivation of the inner life. And so it becomes incumbent upon us if we do want to return to our true selves and we do want to be in touch with who we are in our essence, that we do engage in stillness.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think that at some point, we have to engage in some silence, solitude, and stillness or stillness, whatever that looks like. I think, though, what happens is a lot of people have an image when we say engage in solitude or engage in stillness, that means, oh, go get the mat and sit down for 20 minutes or sit down for an hour a day or,
Mm,
go do yoga. And it could be those things. For me, actually, it is some of those things. But
yeah,
also, I think what I tell people is find the place of wonder
Mm.
Where is it that your walls come all the way down, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you think about when you see a sunset, or you see a gorgeous tree or flower, or you engage a baby, or maybe you love music and you're lost in a jazz set or a classical music. But all of a sudden, everything inside of your head quiets, right? Like all the noise goes away and you are just so alive and present in that moment.
Yeah.
And when the walls come down, that's the place of receptivity. I have a friend, for him, he runs several miles a day, but then every
Mhm.
Friday he takes a 15-mile run. And that's his place of stillness. He's not on his phone. He's not,
Yeah.
all the walls just come down and the world is silent. And in that silence, him and the divine, that's the place where he communes with love. And, sometimes I can get up and I'm going, and I'll lay down in bed and realize, like, oh, let me just take a moment right here to drop down into the deepest part of myself, take a breath,
Yeah.
envision, divine love loving me, and just be in that place in my mind. I call it my secret place, where I'm just receiving love into me. And so yes, it can be long periods and consistent periods, but it can also be, can I pause and take 3 really deep breaths with
Mm.
all of me open to receive love in this moment? Can I begin my day turning my attention toward love? I begin my day just in my mind, like, all that is eternal within me greets the wonder of this day. Love flow to me, love flow through me. And so I'm setting my intention to live and move and have my being in love. So I think, yes, we want to get still enough to hear the song of our heart, to remember what it is that love sings over us. And also, in working with the world, what's some baby steps that you can move into practices of stillness and silence and solitude? They count as well.
Of course,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And you're right. Sometimes it is just a moment. It's a pause for a deep breath
Yeah.
and setting the intention to drop in. I will say, sort of circling back to the idea of misconceptions about God that came up in the passage that you read, that in my own experience, when I first embarked on spirituality, or my spiritual journey consciously, I had so much baggage from my experience of church as a child. And
Yes.
I really couldn't separate my trauma in the church experience from my trauma in my family. That was very much intertwined because we were in church 5 days a week, and my father was very active in the church and my mother worked in the church and at the church. And so I was unable to separate any of that. And so when I first consciously said, okay, I'm going to start exploring spirituality, if you just even said the word God to me, I was like,
Yeah.
and so I had to develop the capacity.
Yeah.
And I bring that up because I just think that that's a common experience, whether it's the synagogue or the mosque or the church or the temple or or and. There's a lot of folks that have to move through misconceptions
Yes.
around the divine. And it was so it for me when I encountered Sufism, which is Islamic mysticism for any of the listeners who haven't caught that at this point, that the conception of God was so different. It, and I don't, and you may know this, so please forgive me if I'm saying things that you already are very well aware of, but the Quran begins with the words, "In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate."
Yeah.
And those words are repeated in every chapter, save
Yeah.
one. That's the beginning of every chapter. And then there are verses that say the word Rahman, which is the word for mercy and is associated with mercy and compassion and love, like that this is an equivalent word an equivalent name, divine name, as the divine name God, in Arabic being Allah, in Aramaic, Allah, and so on. Aramaic, I bring Aramaic up because of
Yeah.
Jesus
Yeah.
speaking Aramaic, and most religious scholars agree
Yeah.
to this. Um, so it's saying this is an equivalent name. So the unifying name of God and an equivalent name to the unifying name of God is the most merciful, the most compassionate. And the roots to that word, and this is true in other of, I would say, sacred languages, the roots are the same for the word Lord and the word merciful as they share roots for the word for womb.
Yeah.
So the Islamic concept of God is a God that is so loving that all of creation is an expression of love, and that all of creation is connected as in an electric circuitry of love, metaphorically speaking, but also on some level,
Energetically
realistically
speaking,
speaking.
cosmologically speaking. Yes,
Yes,
yes, I'm
yes.
with you. Yes.
And that everything, even those things that we don't understand, are encompassed by this womb-like, mothering, inherently built into the system love.
Yeah.
And one of the practices that I had to do, that I did when I was working on this in my own childhood misconceptions about God, was I recited that phrase. Of course, as a Sufi, I recited it in Arabic. So I was reciting Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. But I just recited that phrase over and over, visualizing light from the heavens coming down and washing, and and it changed my heart.
Yeah.
It changed my relationship, my perception of the divine, my relationships with the divine. I experienced it, truly felt like being washed,
Yeah.
like as
Absolutely.
if the angels were present with me
Yes.
and washing away those childhood misconceptions.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
now, like, there's a part of me that even just saying the words, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate, like it touches a place
Yeah.
where I remember that experience of feeling so washed and feeling so loved
Yeah.
in a gentle, soft, merciful way.
Yeah.
And if we all collectively knew our religions well, we would know that love.
Yeah.
And
If
we
we knew them
would,
well. Yeah. And not the fear that someone else handed us inside of our religions. Yeah. Which is, one of the things that I realized was that I had been conditioned to see the divine a certain way. And so I remember decades ago now, but being on a walk and having this sense of spirit inviting me to give back to God everything that I had believed to be true about God, and that the divine would sift it and give back to me what was truth, big T truth. And I said yes to that, just like the that couple teaching me about um, God as a loving father, God as a loving mother. That was a gateway, a portal, an entry into knowing the divine in a way that I had not experienced growing up. And it was a beginning. And then when I got this invitation some more years later to essentially hand, the divine everything I had ever believed to be true. Essentially, what the divine was saying was, let me cleanse all of those thoughts that you have, all of those ways that you've been conditioned. Your eye is muddy, if you will, and you're seeing through criticism, you're seeing through judgment, you're seeing through harsh, harsh language, you're seeing through fear. And all of that muddies how you think about God, how you think about yourself, how you think about the world. And in the Christian scriptures, there's a verse in the Gospels that says, when the eye is clear, the whole body is full of light. And so
Mm,
that invitation to allow the divine to sift how I was seeing things, what I believed, when I said yes to that, I thought it was a one-time thing, but
mm,
it turned into this expansive way of being. And from that, I learned that love is the ultimate message of the universe. Love is the wholeness of everything. It's the solid foundation within and beneath us. It's love is boundless and unrestrained. It's the sustaining and creative energy of the cosmos. And love heals. And if we learn to live and move and have our being in love, then we join in and are infused with that same healing wholeness that essentially created the world. And love is free and it's unafraid. And it really is the ground of all being. And if we are to tap into that goodness, that all encompassing care and merciful compassion that sustains and upholds all things, then we learn to live from the energies of that, from the sustaining force of that. And we learn to participate in our world, not from reaction, not from fear, but from
mm,
response. And so I'm always listening. Like, it doesn't matter what you call yourself or how you identify or what label, are your words soaked in love? Is it coming from the sound of love? Can I hear the resonance and the heartbeat of love in that? When I read Sufi passages, it's all there. I feel such a deep resonance, right? And so I, I'm listening. Like, I think often in Hebrew scriptures, there's a story of one of the prophets going out and he's supposed to be looking for God. And there's like an earthquake and there's this loud noise and there's all these things. And it says in one translation that he heard God in the sound of sheer silence.
mm.
What is that invitation? If we quiet ourselves down enough, if we still all the things someone else told us enough and pause, the silence will speak to us. And up from that comes the energy of love because it is the song that holds all things together, all things together. Yeah.
Mm. Beautiful. Yeah. And thank you for sharing this description of this of love as boundless.
Yeah.
Because that,
That womb, and it made me think about like, love is the womb that we all were birthed from, right? I
yeah,
mean, we come from that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So you've already, whether intentionally or unintentionally, you've given us little tidbits of tips like pause, you breathe, stillness, go inside, um, allow that, allow yourself to feel love in order to be filled up by the energy of love and to live and to embody that love. Um, so do you have any 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 more practical
I love that.
suggestions for those of us who sometimes are challenged in and what was that you said? You will know them by the love. Some of us who are not
Yeah.
always
I,
evidencing that
I
you'll
get the how
know.
question a lot. People are like, oh, that sounds so great up there, Felicia, but how? How do you live that? What do you do? What are your practices? Um, and I think for me, one of my main practices, I do meditation. I also do yoga. I really believe in returning to the body. Um, And so I think, particularly in Christianity, which is, my tradition, we have been cut off from our body. We were told that all flesh is bad and, the heart is a heart of stone and blah, blah, blah. And so we disconnect from our body. and we hand our power and our agency outside of ourselves. And so, in that, the body holds every memory that we've ever had. And we with ourselves will be the longest relationship that we will ever have. Um, and so I think one of the invitations of love is to return home to yourself, to return home to the wisdom of your body. So there is a spiritual practice called bio spiritual focusing, which is to invite you to essentially, through consent, listen to the deeper parts of the wisdom of your own self, to be present to what needs to be tended, or nurtured, or cared for, and to be with it in a very compassionate way, without critique, without judgment, but just to be with it, not to fix it or change it, which is so much of what we are taught is that, oh, we need to come in and rescue this or save it or make it better. But just learning to listen within, um, which actually couples very nicely with something that we are learning in our compassion based spiritual direction. And that's the practice of compassionate listening, or pulse, where we're learning to pay attention and understand empathically, to listen to the sacred, and to sense that and embody it. So, those are kind of my practices that I do. I end every day dropping down, into my body and just asking myself, is there something that I need to listen to today? What's going on? Is there a pain that I'm feeling in my body that I need to just sit and acknowledge, and be with? Is there something here? So I share that because in learning to be with my own body without harsh judgment or critique, and learning to listen to myself well and tend and nurture the places that were flaring up and asking for attention, it's also helped me learn to be with others in that way. But I can't give away compassion if I don't practice compassion, right? Um, so I think the practice of being with myself, of being able to sit in that place. You talked about visualizing light and how it felt like you were being washed. Um, that is a big practice for me. If you can imagine, what is the safest place for you? Can you imagine you and the divine together in that place? Can you imagine yourself being held and being cared for? Can you allow yourself to be without wanting to run away, without feeling like you're a disappointment? What is it to sit and look at yourself in the mirror, or to sit in the quiet place with the divine and not feel judged and not want to judge, right? So I think those are some practices that are entry points and points to maintain a relationship with divine love. Yeah. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you. And to remember that as the divine love is boundless, there's always more to receive. There's there's always more love.
There's always more to receive.
Mhm.
I think when we understand that love is boundless and that is infinite, I often think of like a water wheel, and the practice of kenosis, of emptying and
Mhm.
refilling, is emptying, but we can empty, and we run out. Love never runs out because it's boundless, it's infinite.
Yeah.
It is the source, and it will always generate loving energy and care in the world and toward us. Yeah.
I love that image of the water wheel because in in meeting people where they are, whether they're spiritual but not religious or deeply devoted to a tradition, I love that image because it's an image that crosses traditions and no traditions. So a person who's spiritual but not religious can use the image of emptying and filling, uh, or emptying and awakening, or emptying and being renewed and sustained and filled. Like that image works, for someone who's not religious, as well as someone who is consciously participating in growing intimate connection with the divine as they relate to the sacred and define that for themselves. So thank you for that. So I appreciate so much your time. I am grateful to be sharing the journey with you. Any last minute words of wisdom, any insights or takeaways that you want to impart?
Hmm. That's really good. I think if I had last minute words of wisdom, I would just encourage people again, often in sitting with people in direction, what I notice is so much of what we've done is hand power and validation outside of ourselves. It's
Mm.
like we're chasing the carrot on the stick. And so my wisdom would be to return home, home to the deepest parts of yourself, home to love, and to remember that our work is to love, to surrender, to trust, to be, that ours is the work of participation. And as we do that in the circle of life and um, participate with love, that water wheel does just keep on turning. So return home.
Beautiful. And I noticed that you have your book in your hand. So
Yeah,
would
I
you
was
hold it
thinking.
up? Why am I?
Yes.
Beautiful.
Um,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you for allowing me to share a passage from Anne today and to share my thoughts on love and stillness. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks again for being here. Thank you for the great conversation. Thank you to all listeners for joining us on Beyond Names. Before we go briefly, if you would please just take one breath to pause and reflect for a moment on anything that stays with you from this conversation. You will know them by their love. Can't help but come back to that.
Yeah.
May something you heard today help you reconnect with the light and love in your own heart. May you grow in compassion and clarity and courage. May you find your way again and again back home to yourself, back home to the divine, however you name it, back home to the love and the light in your own heart and soul. If today's conversation spoke to you, please like, share, and comment on this episode, and please follow Beyond the Names. To make an appointment with me, please visit habibburger.com. Until next time, may you be light, may you consciously participate in growing your light, and may you share your light. Peace be with you.